So what sources of technical information can we use or should we be using? Um, so I want you to think back about what Doug said this morning. And no matter whether you're coming in under the UIC rule or whether you're coming in under the stormwater permit and need to provide BMPs and the core elements, there's a couple of basic bits of information that each site or each proponent should be providing to you whenever they come in to do a project, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And one of my favorites, which is sometimes hard to get through to folks that come in, is just characterizing what the soil is on the site, right? So whenever you're coming in, whatever you're going to be proposing to do, the thing that you have to remember as far as the city of Walla Walla is you have to retain the 25-year event, right? So there's a volume of rainfall that's associated with that, and it's got to go somewhere. So either you're going to construct a BMP that's going to handle that, or you're going to put it into the ground, probably one of those two. So you got to find out what kind of soil is on your site. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. One of my favorite, as I tell folks, is go out and dig a hole on your site. All right. And not just one hole. Sometimes it's multiple holes, depending on how big your site is. But one of the best ways of knowing what's going on is to just go find out. There are a number of different ways that you can do this. Probably the most expensive, but well-documented way to do it is to do soil borings. But not every site is going to do that. Really depends on what type of project it is, how large the project is, and all that. But it's a great way to find out what's going on the site. Typically, soil borings are accompanied by a geotechnical report that comes in with it. So you've got a soil scientist that is there. They're doing, they're collecting the information on the site, and then they're going to be doing a classification of the soils. They're going to be telling you everything you need to know about what's underneath the site. The important part about that is that if your project is coming in, and let's say it's a commercial project, they're going to need to know what type of footings they can build, for example, if they're putting up a building, or what size building they can put up, whether it's a 1-story, 2-story, what type of foundation they need to be building. So is that important, for example, in a residential development? Probably not. You could probably get away with a lot less than that, although sometimes projects do go out and they do that as well. So that's pretty much the high standard of information that you're going to be able to get on a site. But on the other end of that spectrum is just going out and digging a hole to find out what you've got on the site. And if infiltration is being proposed on the site, then there are a couple of different types of tests that should be done at that site when they're out there. So, and the most important while you're there, obviously, is this infiltration test. So if you're going to infiltrate water on your site, you got to know what is the KSAT for the site, right? What's the saturation or the saturated infiltration rate for that site? Because we all want to know during that storm that it's really necessary for. Is the BMP going to work? Are you going to get that infiltration rate that's going to keep working when it really needs to be working? So determining that is really important. Doing that on site, and more importantly, doing that on site where they think they're going to locate the BMP is even more important. So As I'm sure most of you know, people will go out, they'll dig a hole on their site. They'll say, I've got a 1 acre site. I went and dug a hole or maybe 2 holes, and this characterizes what my soil is out there. It's best if they will do this in the general vicinity, or if not, right underneath where they're proposing to put the BMP in. That way you get the best information possible on your infiltration test. You don't want them testing at a location that's too far away from where they're proposing, because there could be some variability in the soil, obviously. And if you take a look at our handbook, we'll talk about this a little bit later on and tomorrow. We do have correction factors for the fact that maybe they didn't do such a good job. I know a lot of jurisdictions use safety factors whenever their designers come in for infiltration rates, and it's very common. So I would encourage you to, if you don't already apply those, to look into that and see see how you compensate for that, because it's really important to, especially on larger sites, to know exactly what's going on underneath the BMP that you're proposing to put in and about to review and approve. One of the other things that we're trying to determine out there is, what is the depth to groundwater? Okay. Not all sites are going to be able to go out and do a borehole test to drill down and find out what the depth of groundwater is. So one of the acceptable methods here at the city is to use Ecology's well reports that are out there. If you're not familiar with Ecology's well site, or our website for that, you can just Google that or go to Ecology and search for it, and it'll take you right to it. But this is a very handy tool. Whenever a well is dug out in the field, it's supposed to be registered with the Department of Ecology. And then you can use those well reports to help you determine what's going on, either close by or maybe not close by the site, but something that is in a similar strata, if you will, underneath. It's most of these reports are older, which is okay by me, but they all list a lot of really good information. And the most important one on here is basically the depth to the static water level. So really good information when nothing else is available. The other thing that I think is really important as a jurisdiction is your local knowledge. If you have projects that have been completed nearby, which you have really good information on, I would say that it is a great resource for you to try to rely on as far as making decisions on what's going on under the proponent site. Also, if there's any sort of field inspection or documentation information that's out there, if there's ever been any other construction nearby that your jurisdiction has been out to do inspections on. It may not be someone that's in your group as far as stormwater is concerned. It may be a building inspector, or it may be someone else in your development services group. All this information is really helpful. It can help inform you as to whether or not you believe that the proponent is correct in how they've characterized what's going on their site. And I know for me, whenever I'm looking at information, I always like to have some sort of backup source if it's available. And anytime that you can provide yourself with that, whether it's coming from the proponent or whether you can go and look that up in your own records, is really helpful to have. So, okay, geotechnical reports. So, as I mentioned, really helpful probably the highest standard of what you can do out on a site. There's also a couple of other things that I would mention here that if you're going to be using the soil on your site for treatment, that you should also have the proponent test while they're out there. And they're pretty simple and easy tests, but they're often overlooked, and they're very important in answering the question, can the soil provide any type of treatment whatsoever? So the first one is the cation exchange capacity, obviously CEC. To satisfy the UIC rule, we're looking for a certain level of CEC out there that will provide us treatment. Okay, so the other one is the organic content of the soil. Not always present in soils, really depends on where you're at. And so these two things, along with your infiltration test, so those three bits of information are really important as far as initial testing is concerned for any proposed site. And if a design engineer calls me up and says, what do I need to do to get started? These are the three things that I'm going to tell them that they really need to know out on their site. That and the fact that they really kind of need to know where are they going to come in at? Are they going to come in and use surface treatment? Are they going to follow the core elements, or are they going to follow the UIC rule? So that's some of the best first advice that I can give proponents whenever they call me up, or whenever they come in for a pre-application meeting, or whenever they're in discussions with the city in whatever fashion or form. The next thing that we see a lot of here for our projects is Soil Conservation Service soil reports. Okay, so a lot of characterization is done just by the general soil type and what the Soil Conservation Service says are applicable to those types of soils. We do accept that type of information when it's proposed. We try not to we try to encourage our proponents to dig a little bit deeper, if you will, no pun intended, but to dig a little bit deeper into their site to make sure that what they're dealing with is actually what the Conservation Service says is out there. A lot of our older parts of our city have there's been fill put on top of them. So just because the SCS report says that there's some kind of silty loam out there or whatever, that may be the case, but that may not be at the surface. And in certain instances, there may be quite a bit of fill that's out there on these sites, and it may be what we would consider to be unbuildable in. So it's really good to know from the proponent if they're aware of what's out there and what they're actually going to be building on. What other sources of technical information can we use? All right. Well, there was a lot of talk about ADT, average daily traffic counts, and it's referenced quite a bit in the manual. So there are, you need to know this information to determine whether or not you have a high use site or not, right? How do you determine that? Well, a couple of different ways. Your jurisdiction, each jurisdiction is probably a little bit different, but I do get asked this question a lot. And so I wanted to just kind of speak to that a little bit. There's a couple of different ways. For your own city streets, you may actually have a traffic study that's been done in the past, or some sort of trip generation calculations. So you've seen them out there. There are these little boxes with the rubber strips on that traffic engineers put out to take traffic counts. That information is incredibly valuable because that can help you determine your how many trips are out there on the different segments of your roads, and especially if you're doing projects within the city or jurisdictional right of way, that information is really great to know, so that you can tell your designer, yes, I have an ADT that's high. It's this number, so we have to provide this type of treatment. Okay. Um, if it's for example, a non-residential site that's out there, then you're talking about some sort of office building, perhaps some other sort of commercial development. And for that, it's a little bit different. Here at the city, we use a couple of different references, but the one we use most frequently is just the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual. Okay. Um, this is not the most recent version, by the way. This is the 9th edition. It's the only one I could find that I could get a screen clip so that I could show folks what this actually has in it. But this type of document will provide you, based on the type of use that you have on your proposed site, how many trip ends or what the average daily trip count should be for that type of a project. So for example, if you're proposing some sort of commercial development like a doctor's office, or let's say a grocery store, for example, all those different tables are in this type of document. You can go into there and use it to basically double check what information your designer is providing to you and where they're getting it from. Also, I would just mention as well that any of these sources of technical information, please encourage your proponents to document where they came from. Okay. We see a lot of proposals that come in that just say, well, the ADT is this. Okay, that's great. I want to trust you. I would like to believe you. What's your source? So do not be afraid of asking where this information comes from. And certainly if you have a source that you're using or you want your proponents to use, put that out there to them so that they know what it is, and they can provide that to you, because again, it's going to save you time in the long run whenever you're doing your review. All right. The other process that is usually handled by the local jurisdiction is the SEPA determination. And SEPA determinations are quite helpful. I find that somewhat overlooked, but almost all development needs to go through the SEPA process here in the city of Walla Walla. And getting your hands on the SEPA determinations are most helpful. One of the big reasons why I find that helpful is it lays out all of the local requirements that are going to be needed to done on the proposed project. So if, for example, there are some sort of improvements that are going to need to be made onto your jurisdictional roads, for example, there's going to be need to be widening. There needs to be a creation of bike lanes or footpaths, sidewalks, lighting, all the way down to possibly even whether or not your street's going to have curb and gutter, which seems kind of silly, but is quite important. Is usually going to be located, or it's going to be discussed in your SEPA determination. So I encourage you to look that up, keep track of those, and if you need to know where to get that information and you can't find it from your local jurisdiction, you can look this up on the Department of Ecology website. They do have a SEPA tracking system that's in there, And all of that is looked at by Ecology. And one of the good things about that is that if the site has a requirement for a construction stormwater general permit, that's typically going to be in the SEPA documentation, and it's going to be in a letter that comes from a reviewer from the Department of Ecology. So when you're discussing this with your proponent and he's trying to argue whether or not you need to have a SWIP or what permit you're going to come in under, sometimes this is really helpful in providing that information to folks so that there's no questions asked about this.